All right, geometry. We are doing this review. Um, you should be able to see this review in the Google Classroom at the top. Geometry, review geometry unit 2 test. Again, this test is going to be on Friday, or for my Tuesday, Thursday classes, this test is going to be on Thursday. So it depends, if you're Monday, Wednesday, Friday, your test is Friday, and we're reviewing on Wednesday. If you are a Tuesday, Thursday class, you're reviewing on Tuesday, your test is on Thursday. All right. Well, let's get to it. So again, you click that little link and you open it up and you should see your formative review geometry unit 2 test. Okay. Now we're going to go through this whole thing and I'm going to be using my whiteboard to kind of help me see everything and maybe write on it. Okay. So it says, what is the hypothesis? If you run, then you will sweat. Now remember, this right here is a conditional statement. Okay, this whole thing is called a conditional statement because it has if and then it has then. Anytime you see an if then statement, that's a conditional statement. All right. So if you run, then you will sweat. Okay, that's conditional. Now, remember, if then makes it conditional. Okay, and if this first part is called what we call the P, and then the Q is at the end. Okay, if P, then Q. So whenever you see the hypothesis, that's your P. Okay, they're asking you what is after the if. If it asks you for the conclusion, like on number 2, that's asking you for the after the then. Okay, so if P, then Q. If hypothesis, then conclusion. So you need to know that the hypothesis is after the if at the beginning, and then the conclusion is after the then at the end. Okay, so what is the hypothesis? If you run, then you sweat. Well, then it's going to be P if you run. So answer number 1 is you run. So that's, ooh. So number 1 going to be A. All right, let's go back. Number 2, okay, what is the conclusion? If you run, then you will sweat. So again, we got if, then, here's my P, here's my Q, right? So the Q is the last part, and that's the conclusion. You will sweat. So what's the conclusion? B. You will sweat. Okay? So 2 will be B. Cool? All right. Number 3. Oops. Okay. What is the hypothesis if you, and sorry if you hear some noise, I'm outdoors and there's people doing stuff, but what is the hypothesis? If, there's my if, you score more points, then you will win. All right? So let's think about that. Okay, remember the hypothesis is at the beginning after the if. That's the P. So if you score more points, that's my hypothesis. All right, so 3 is A. Okay, number 4, what is the conclusion? The same as sentence. If you score more points, that's my P, then you will win. That's my Q. All right, so again, conclusion is the last part after then. Q is you will win. So that's my conclusion. You will win. All right, so 4 is C. All right, let's look at number 5 here. Let me move that down. All right, on number 5, given the following conditional statement, remember conditional is if then, if two angles are complementary, then they add up to 90 degrees. Which of the following statements is the inverse? Now remember, inverse, okay? Inverse takes the P and the Q and makes it opposite, okay? So basically, inverse is when you use knots, okay? Or another way to say it is you do opposites, okay? It's important that you keep the same exact order, and you can use the word knots to make it opposite. So here's the question. my sentence says if two angles are complementary. What's the opposite of complementary? Not complementary, right? So if two angles are not complementary, kind of hard to write on this, sorry. Then they add up to 90. Well, instead of they add up to 90, what's the opposite of adding up to 90? They don't add up to 90. All right, I know it's kind of ugly. So what's my answer? How can I make both of these opposite? Which answer choice gives me the same order but opposites? And it would be if two angles are not complementary, then they don't add up to 90. That's going to be letter B. Okay, so remember, inverse is the same order. It's just opposite. The hypothesis and the conclusion are both opposite. So 5 is going to be B. All right. Number 6. Given the following conditional statement, if lines are parallel, then the lines do not intersect. Okay. Now, it says, which of the following is a biconditional? Now, please remember, biconditional, it's the prefix bi is there because it's true both ways. Two-way street. It's true one way, it's true the other way. Okay. So, in this case, technically, there are lines that don't intersect that are skew, so we're just going to give the biconditional form of this sentence. And remember, for biconditional, please remember, you have to use if and only if in the middle. Okay? And biconditional is not if then. No if then. It's if and only if in the middle. Okay? So, which one of these answer choices gives me the hypothesis and the conclusion with if and only if in the middle? Lines are parallel if and only if lines do not intersect. That would be letter C. Okay? So 6 is C. All right. Let's move on to the next page. Number 7. All right. All right. The new statement is which of the following? Okay. So it gives us the original and it gives us a new statement. All right. So it says if a point is a midpoint, then it is half the distance from the endpoints. The new statement, if the point is not half the distance to the endpoints, then it is not a midpoint. So what happened here? So let's look at this. A point as a midpoint is now over here. So it's switched, right? You agree that there's a switch, like the hypothesis is now at the end, and then half the distance from the endpoints is now over here, half the distance from the endpoints. So there's a switch, but that's not it. Did you see what happened here? It said a point is a midpoint. Now it says it's not a midpoint. And it says is half the distance to the endpoints. Now it is not half the distance to the endpoints. So it's also opposite. Okay? So there's two changes. There's a switch and they're opposites. Now we got to figure this out. Which one of these four answer choices is when you switch and make it opposite? Is it biconditional? Well, no, biconditional uses if and only if. I don't see that. Is it contrapositive? Maybe. What about letter C? Converse. Now, converse is when you only switch. So it can't be just converse. What about letter D? Is it inverse? Well, inverse is when you do the opposites only. So it's not converse because that's only one of them. It's not inverse because that's only one of them. So let's go back to letter B. It is contrapositive. Contrapositive is a weird long word, and you know what? It makes sense you're doing two things. It's the complicated word, so it's a complicated process. You have two steps. You make them opposite and you switch them. Okay, so please remember, contrapositive is opposite and switching them. Okay, number 8, which of the following? Oh, and by the way, that's 7B. There we go, 7B. All right. So next, let's talk about number 8. Which of the following is a conditional statement? Now remember, conditional is if, hypothesis, then conclusion. Now, letter A says, I want to go to HEB and buy orders. No, that's no if then. What about B? I go to HEB if and only if I buy Oreos. That's biconditional. That's not just conditional, right? If and only if is not conditional. It's biconditional. C, if I go to HEB, then I will buy Oreos. Hey, there's if then. I like that. Let's circle it. But what about letter D? HEB conditions Oreos. Okay, just because it says condition in it does not make it conditional. So 8 is C. Cool. All right, next. On number 9. Now we're going to select the converse. Now please remember, what does a converse do? I think of it like converse shoes. If you're going to tie your shoes, you got to switch the laces when you're tying your shoes. So all converse is switching the order. So let's figure out the hypothesis. If you work out, that's my P, then you will be fit, that's my Q. All I got to do is switch that order. So you will be fit goes to the front, you work out goes to the end. So which one for a converse switches the order? Well, let's see here. It should say if you are fit, then you worked out. That would be letter A, okay? I know there's some tense changing in there, but that is the answer. All right, so 9A. No, not that. All right, let's get to some true false with 10, 11, 12, 13. All right, now if something is false, you got to be able to give what we call a counter example that proves that it's false. Let's do that. On number 10, if two angles are supplementary, then the two angles are 100 degrees and 80 degrees. Sorry about that. So back on track. If two angles are supplementary, then the two angles are 100 degrees and 80 degrees. Now, that can be true, but are all supplementary angles always 180? False. Okay. Other pairs of angles can add up to 180. Like what? 90 and 90 is a counterexample, right? I mean, you can think of a lot of different combinations that add up to 180. So just because two angles are supplementary does not mean they're only 100 plus 80, right? Number 11, if 3 points are on the same plane, then the 3 points are coplanar. Well, that's what it means to be coplanar, on the same plane. So that's true. If two angles add up to 90, then they are both right angles. Think about that. If two angles add up to 90, then they are both right angles, which means they're both 90. Well, no, if both angles are 90 and they add up, they're actually 180, right? That's false. If two lines are perpendicular, then they intersect at right angles. That's what perpendicular means. They intersect and they make 90-degree angles. So that's actually true. So we're going to knock these four out real quick. BA, BA. So on number 10, BA, BA. And then we're on the last page. We've got 4 more to do real quick. Let's scroll down here. Oh, there we go. All right, what is the inverse? What is the inverse? So remember, inverse is when you just do opposites in the same order. Okay? So if a figure has 3 sides and the figure is a triangle, so if a figure does not have 3 sides, the figure is not a triangle. That's what we're going to find. And so which answer choice matches that? If a figure does not have 3 sides, that would be letter C, then the figure is not a triangle. Remember, inverse is opposites in the same order. All right, so what is the converse of the following conditional statement? Remember, converse means switch the order. So if a figure has 3 sides, then the figure is a triangle. Just switch that order. So now it's going to say if the figure is a triangle, then the figure has 3 sides. That would be letter B. There's no nots, there's no doesn'ts, there's no opposites. It's just switching. Okay, last 2. Okay, now remember, contrapositive, that's the crazy one. There's 2 things that are going to happen, right? It's going to be opposites, and it's going to switch the order. Okay? So let's think about this. If a figure has 3 sides, then the figure is a triangle. So I'm going to put figure as a triangle at the beginning, but make it opposite. So it's going to be if a figure is not a triangle. And now I'm going to take figure has three sides, put it at the end, make it opposite. The figure does not have three sides. So please remember, you have to do two things. Make it opposite, switch the order, okay? So if a figure is not a triangle, then the figure does not have three sides. That would be letter D. Okay. Now, last but not least, biconditional has to use this fancy phrase in the middle, if and only if. And remember, there's no if at the beginning and no then in the middle. So, which one uses if and only if in the middle? Boom, that's my biconditional statement. All right. So, if you can understand this review, you'll be prepared for your test in 2 days. Okay. Make sure you go over this review. Make sure you put all the answers into Go Formative, which I need to do right now. So it's, what is it? CBDA. All right, so let's put it in. And then we can hit submit. Okay. All right. So I hope you prepare well for your test and that you get a great grade. Let's finish the 9 weeks strong.